So this presentation we have gone through 2 or 3 times over the last 1 week, but again we will quickly go through the important aspects of deep learning. We have seen that how we define deep learning in different layers, and the function of these layers is that the lower level layers or the initial few layers, they identify what we can call as the low level features. So for example, when we are working on identification of a human face, it will identify the different lines, the different curves, and the smaller parts of the details. Then those things are aggregated, and then we start seeing the shape of an eyebrow or an eye or an ear, and then those things are aggregated further in the subsequent layers, and then we start seeing the full face. The structure of each layer is that each layer is comprised of different neurons, and we multiply the value of each neuron with certain weight, and then we take a sum of that. On that sum, we apply an activation function, and whatever is the output, that becomes the input for the next layer. And that's the process which will be followed for the entire network. And when we define the network, then we have the option of um, saying that how many layers we will have or how many neurons that we'll have in each layer. Activation function we have discussed earlier, that activation function is the one which gives the non-linearity. It means that whatever is the value that we achieve here, then we apply a certain other function, and that function decides that what would be the weight or whether that particular neuron would be activated or not. It means that based on the value that we achieve after the activation function has been applied, then we would decide that whether that neuron or the value obtained in that neuron would be carried forward or not. So whether that particular neuron would remain active or not, that is what we decide with the activation function, and that's the very reason why it is called an activation function. And this could be as simple as that. If we say that if the summed value is greater than something, then the value could be 1, and if it is less than something, then the value would be 0. So if it is 0, then obviously that neuron is not carrying any weight, or that neuron is not really active anymore, because once it becomes 0, then anything that you multiply with that will become 0. So in a way, that neuron actually remains inactive that point onwards. So that's the activation function. So the purpose of the activation function is that based on the summed output that we receive, whether that neuron will remain active going forward or it's dropped. Okay, that is what the activation function does. And because of that, because we are able to drop a function, or we are able to change the value of these summation, it brings the non-linearity. It means that now we can go on changing the values for the next layer as we wish. And this non-linearity becomes the key to the deep learning function. The different types of the activation functions that we use, the major one is what we should be knowing. These are the ones which are used most frequently. The first one is called the sigmoid function. Sigmoid function, whatever, so here in this equation you see whatever is the value of the z here, that is the summed value that we are receiving from the previous layer. So on this summed value, if we put this formula 1 by 1 plus e raised to the power minus z, and z is the summed value, then it does not matter what is the value of z, it will fall between 0 and 1. So if the value is very large, then it will become very close to 1. And if the value is very small and negative, it will become very close to 0. So this function reduces any number and brings that in the range of 0 and 1. Now, based on that, now the system would decide that whether the what is the value, and then we can define a threshold and say that if that threshold is say less than 0.5, then the value will become 0, and if it is more than 0.5, it will become 0. This one is used mainly in the binary classification output layer. So if we are doing a classification, and if that classification is binary, that is, we are dividing all the inputs only into 0 and 1, yes and no, then we normally use the sigmoid function. But the thing to remember here is that once you apply sigmoid function, any number will be brought into the range of 0 and 1. The second function is called the tan h function. So tan h function brings any value between -1 and 1. And the formula is 2 divided by 1 plus e raised to the power -2 and x, where x is the value that we have. And sometimes you will see that it is being shown as x or z. And this one we will use as we start using the natural language processing. In that one, the tan h function is used extensively. So the things to remember is that the output range will be between -1 and 1, and it is mainly used in different variants of the recurrent neural network, which is the main thing that we use in the natural language processing. The third kind of activation function is called softmax. So softmax also is like a sigmoid. It will reduce the number to between 0 and 1. And this one is used in the multi-class classification. So while sigmoid we use when we have to classify into two groups, if we are using multi-class classification, it means that the output group is more than 2, like what we had in the classification of digit or the fashion items. Uh, that's where we will use the softmax function. So softmax function, what it does is that it will take the uh, inputs. So this one will be applied in the output layer. And suppose if we are classifying things into 10 different objects, it will have the input as the raw numbers that it will receive from the previous layer. Then it assigns a probability to each of these numbers. So depending upon what these numbers are, it will convert them into a probability. And probability, as we know, is always between 0 and 1. So after having got the probability, then we say that which one is the most likely output. And we will say that this particular object, which was classified by the x values or the feature values, is most, what is the likelihood that that object is either, or that particular image of the digit is either 0 or 1 or 2. That is what the softmax function gives us. And ReLU is the one that we have already discussed, which reduces the value between 0 and infinity. So if the value of the z or the value of the summed function is less than 0, then it converts that into 0. And if it is more than 0, then it will leave like that. The purpose of the activation function, we have seen that if we have a series of linear function, then even if we have many of them, it can effectively be reduced into a single function, and therefore it does not really serve the purpose of bringing non-linearity. And non-linearity is required because most of the data or the underlying structure in most of the data is actually non-linear and irregular. And that's why we need a function which will take care of identification of these nonlinear data. Having said that, now we will go back to our notebook and we will revisit whatever we have done earlier, and then we will find out some new interesting ways of using the neural network. And for designing the deep neural network, we will use the TensorFlow libraries. TensorFlow is a library from Google, and above that, we will use Keras as the operating layer. Keras is actually a wrapper on the TensorFlow library. So it makes the interface with the TensorFlow library so much easier. And that's why we'll use Keras, because it's a very user-friendly wrapper layer. So we import TensorFlow, we import Keras from TensorFlow, and we do certain imports from sklearn and other imports which we are going to use in the model here. So after having done those imports, then we define the model. So there are two ways that you can define the model. Last time we had seen this way of defining the model. Now I have just put that into a function so that this model can be called again and again. But the process of definition last time that we had, that we define a variable and then we can instantiate that. So the model that we are going to create is going to be a sequential model where there would be several layers stacked one above the other or one after the other. And then we say that our first layer is the flattening layer. This flattening layer is required because my input is two-dimensional, and this will process the images where each image is a 28 by 28 image, and the data is given in terms of pixels. So first we flatten that, and after we flatten, it will become 784 different pixels for each image. Then we define these layers as you see. So these are the hidden layers, and then in the end we'll define the output layer. So after having instantiated this model as a sequential model, then we go on adding different layers. So we say lm.add or whatever variable name that you give. It could be model, it could be ABC or XYZ. And then we say lm.add. It means that to this model now, I am adding a layer. And then we define the type of the layer. So we say that first one is a flattening layer. So this layer will take the input and flatten that. Or flattening means that it will bring that into a one-dimensional shape. So now my input has been taken and input has been processed, brought into a single dimensional shape. Then we start adding the hidden layers, the computation layers or the hidden layers. We define that what kind of layer it would be. So we are saying this will be a dense layer, means fully connected layer. And this one will comprise of, or this layer will comprise of 500 neurons. And in each neuron, the activation would be ReLU. And ReLU activation means that it will bring the output into this shape. Anything which is less than 0 will be brought to 0. So if you see here, anything which is less than 0 will become 0, and anything which is more than 0 will retain its own value. That's a very simple function, but that's found to be a very useful function. And in almost all the cases, all the hidden layers will have a ReLU function. Similarly, we define the next layer and the next layer and the next layer. And in the end, the last one becomes the output layer, in which the main difference would be that the number of neurons that we'll have here will be equal to the number of classes in which we want our input to be classified into. So if we are dealing with the fashion data set or the digits data set, in both the cases, we are trying to classify our input into 10 different categories, either the 10 different digits or 10 different types of objects. And that's why we are defining here as n classes is equal to 10. And here we just put n classes. This is just to facilitate that if you want to classify into, say, 5 or 6 or any number of classes, this becomes a parameter driven thing. So in the output layer, we are defining how many classes, and this will be equal to the number of classes that you want our input to be classified into, and the activation function is softmax. And as we have seen, that softmax function we are using when we are using the multi-class classification. Once the layer is defined, then we are compiling that here itself. So the two-step process was that we define the model and then we compile the model, and then we can train the model. So earlier in the classic algorithm, what we had done is that we used to identify which libraries to fetch, then we create an instance, and then we directly train the function. Here in the deep neural network, the architecture, or what is also called as the topology. So the architecture or the topology of the neural network will have to be defined by us. It gives us a lot of flexibility that how deep a layer you want, how many neurons that you want to have in that layer, what kind of activation you want to have, and different parameters can be defined. So although it involves one additional step over and above the classical algorithms that we have seen, that step also gives us a lot of flexibility so that we can structure the model, or we can architect the model, or we can define the topography of the model to suit the problem that we have at hand. So in some cases, it can be just 2 layers or 3 layers. In some cases, you may like to have 5 layers or 10 layers. So, and also we can change the activation function depending upon what is the purpose of use. We can have different types of layers depending upon whether we are going to process images, or we are going to process numbers only, or we are going to use the deep neural network to process language or different other types of sequential things. So correspondingly, it can be a convolutional network, or it can be a recurrent network, or we will also see the different other types of networks we can define, like for reinforcement learning and so on. So this part of definition of a neural network or the architecture of the neural network, it gives a lot of flexibility to us. And that's why it's very important to understand that how do we really define this layer. Okay. So this was one way to define that layer that we have seen even earlier. Another way that we can define layer is very similar here, just a small difference here, that we can define a variable, and then we can call tf.keras.sequential in the same way here. And then we provide each of these layers as an element in a list. So if you see, a list starts with this bracket. So the moment the Python sees a bracket, then it knows that now we are encountering a list. And list will have different number of elements, and each of the layer becomes an element inside that. So if you see, it's very similar in the structure, but first we define in classification.model, we are first instantiating a model, and then we are giving the command that add this layer to the model, add this layer to the model. Here, we are defining all these layers as a list, and then that list we are passing as a parameter to the tf.keras.sequential. Otherwise, they are the same. So just to give you that these are the different ways that you can define. I have used for the regression, I am defining the model as a, first we are defining the model as a list or the different layers as a list. And then we are passing that list to the model, and then we are compiling it. So these are the two ways to define it. So let me define that. The second change which we have done compared to last week is that now we are defining this model as a function so that it can be called again and again. So we have given a name to the function, and then parameters, if required, that can be passed here. And then we define the function, we compile the function. Having done that, now let me import certain data sets. So first we'll run with regression. So for getting different data sets, again, I have written those functions. So if I want to get digit data set, all the commands which were running earlier in individual cells, I put that into a function so that it can be reused and we can call that from other places. But the process is the same, and this process we have gone through. In the end, it returns xtrain, xtest, ytrain, and ytest. So, and we will use the same thing for fashion. So here also I've said get fashion data, and once we call this function, then it will return me xtrain, xtest, ytrain, and ytest. But the input will be the fashion data set. Same thing I have done for housing. Here also I fetch the data, and since here we need to do certain processing like one-hot encoding or filling the missing data, all that I have put into a single function so that in one go we can get the xtrain, xtest, ytrain, and ytest. But this time the underlying data set would be from housing. Okay, so I have just done the we'll minimize this. We know how to get the either of the three data sets here. Now we come to the initialization, and in the last class we had also seen the purpose of the early stopping and the checkpointing. So early stopping is used that if the performance is not improving over several epochs, then we are asking the system to stop. And here the different parameters that we were using was how long the system should wait for the performance to improve. So here we are defining patience is equal to 50. It means that it will wait for 50 epochs. And if even after 50 epochs the performance is not improving, then it will call the early stopping. So we'll work with the smaller numbers so that the running time is not very large here. And then we are saying that if the patience is 10, it means that if it is going to wait for 10 different epochs, what is that it's going to monitor? It will monitor the loss on the validation set. So that is what is called as the val loss. It means that on the validation set, monitor the loss. And what was the validation set? We take the training data and we can divide that data set by calling validation split. Or if we want to use the test data, we can use that also. So we will see the use of both of these today. So validation set is the set or the data set on which the training data, during the training process, we have not seen that data, and validation of the actual model would be done on that data. So we train the model on one set of data, and then whatever results we get or whatever the optimized parameters we get, that will be tested, or the results of the actual model will make the predictions on the validation set, and then we'll compare that with the actuals, and that's how we will see that how close our observation is coming. This validation loss is that number. That is the predictions that we obtain on the data set which we have not seen during the training. And model checkpoint, here we are saying that the moment there is an improvement in the performance, then save the model. And what does the model do? In the deep learning model, we have seen that the main purpose of training is to optimize these weights, which give us the best result. So these weights is the one that we will save. And that process is called the checkpointing. And for doing that, we call the model checkpoint function. We provide the name of the file. We say that what is the parameter which it is going to monitor based on which decision would be made to save or not to save. So we are saying again that monitor the loss function or the function value of the loss function. And if there is an improvement, it means that if the loss is getting reduced, then save it. And for the purpose of monitoring, we'll monitor the loss on the validation data set and not on the training data set. Verbose is that how detailed the output on the screen should be. And save best only if we say true, it means that it will not save the weights after each iteration or after each epoch. It will save the weights only if there is an improvement. So only the best one would retain saved. So these are the two things we had experimented even last week. Now I will run the regression function. So this process is to initialize, compile, and run the deep learning model for regression. So first we get the data. So we will use the housing data for regression function. So I say get housing data. And as we have seen earlier, that this function is returning 4 different data sets. And these 4 different data sets we are storing into xtrain, xtest, ytrain, and ytest. And this is the shape of the data. Okay. And we just confirm the input shape of each element. So each of these 16,512 records which we are going to use for training, it has 13 different parameters or 13 different features, 13 different columns. That is the shape. So this one is a one-dimensional data. Now we have also seen that the regression model has been defined in the function regression model. So we'll call that. And so now here, if you see this point onwards, now it becomes similar to what we were doing in the classic algorithms also. That is, we are calling a function and we are creating an instance of that. So the only difference is that this regression model we are defining here, whereas we did not have to define the linear regression or decision tree or random forest earlier, we were just importing it. So now we are calling the regression function. We can see how that model is structured by calling model.summary. And then we train. So if you see this point onwards, it becomes the same as what we have been doing earlier in regression, clustering, or classification using the classic algorithms. So we create an instance of that, and after that, we call the fit function. Okay. So that way, the only additional step was to define the architecture of the model and to compile the model. And if we can do that in one step in a function, then we can just call that function, and that point onwards, the process remains the same. So having created the model, now we will again train the model, and training is done by calling the fit function. So fit function on this instance of the model will call the fit function and will provide the inputs. And here we have again a few more inputs to be given. For example, how many epochs, what would be the validation data or validation split. So this is what I was pointing out earlier, that when we are training, Either we can say validation split is equal to 0.2. It means that it will now take the training data and it will split that into a ratio of 20 and 80. So 20% of the data would be used for validation and 80% will be used for training. Or we can define the validation data. It means, and here we can say that X test and Y test is my validation data. So it will do the training and it will validation would be performed on a data set that you want to provide. So the validation, either we can say that the system itself can split the training data for the purpose of validation, or we can explicitly say that this is the data set that you are going to use for validation. So either of these can be done. So this time we will use the X test and Y test for validating the results. That's what we'll do. So now we will train the function. This part we had seen earlier. The only thing I have introduced, and as you have seen that we go step by step, what I am introducing here is that having seen that what are the different steps involved, now we are putting all those steps into a function, and then we are calling that function to perform regression. So having defined everything, now we call the first function to get data, second function to initialize the model, and after that we do the training of the model. And here, just to save time, I have given only 5 epochs. We'll see the performance over these 5 epochs. Okay, so the rolling, I will not take the rolling data. So you see that over the 5 epochs, the loss has been going on decreasing on the, so the first one is on the training data set and the second one is on the test data set. So in both the cases, it goes on decreasing. Now since we have saved the weights, now we can make the prediction. So here, if you see what we are doing is that now we had saved the weights. So after different epochs are run, we had saved the weights of the best one. And those are the weights we will now reload. Because as the system was running different epochs in the memory, you will have the weights, which is of the last run. And that's why we are now loading the weights of the best model. That is what was saved in this file. And then we compile that model with the new set of weights, and then we make the prediction. So as we come to regression, we get the RMSE and the R square. So here you see that the values are not very good because we have run only 5 epochs. And as we increase the number of epochs, you will see that the performance will also improve. Since it runs very quickly, we can do with 50 epochs. Now we see how the performance has changed. Over 50 epochs, we load the weights of the best model, and then we will see the performance of the model. So you can see here the performance has improved. Earlier it was 100,000 was the RMSE value. Now that has improved and the RMSE value is 63,000, whereas the R square is actually not that great. But the purpose of the session today is to again take you step by step that when we design a model, first we do step by step, then we put those steps into functions, and those functions are the recallable function. We can call that from anywhere, and then it becomes so much easier to operate. In the same manner, you can define the function for classification. So here also we will use the early stopping and checkpointing. So I'm not going into that. The classification part we will call the digit data set, which we have used even earlier. The rest of the things is remains the same. So here the input shape is different because what I have got is the image of each digit, and that image is coming in the form of 28 by 28 table. And as we have seen that when we define the model, the first layer was the flattening layer, which will flatten this 28 by 28 into a single dimensional layer, 784. And that is the layer which will be used for further computation. We have seen that in the output there are 10 different values, and therefore we were using in the output layer, we had put 10 as the number. So the last layer that we define, there would be 10 nodes or 10 neurons. Now we can call the function. While calling the function, we are defining the number of neurons in the output layer and what is the optimizer that we are going to use. So if you see in the classification model, we had also given the provision to provide the optimizer as a input. So we have earlier used Adam, and I think Adam is the one that we had used earlier. We can use different other types of optimizers also. Now they differ in their computation somewhat from the other, and therefore the results would be somewhat different. But the Adam is the most widely used one. So we'll try to use the other models also today, and we can go into the mathematics of each of these later on. But as I have been saying, that it is first we should know that what are the tools that we have available. So when we say what are the tools we have available in this context, what we mean is that what are the different types of optimizers that you have available which can be used. So we have used Adam. Today we will use a few more. So here I am experimenting with Adamax, and there are several other models to choose. So the point I was trying to make is that first step should be to understand what are the different tools available, and then go into the back end of that, then go into the mathematics of that, and see that what is the difference in the computation, or how is say Adamax different from Adam, or how is Adam different from RMS prop. But that part should come only after you have learned that these are the different tools which we have available. These are the different models I have available and how to use it. So first part should be how to use it, and then we can go into how they differ from each other, and therefore in which context one would be better than the other. But even that is not that important, because you can always experiment with all of these. Given the computation power that we have available, if I have say 10 different types of optimizers, rather than saying that this optimizer would be the best in this kind of context, even if you are not knowing that, it doesn't really matter, because I can run with all these 10 different optimizers and see the result, and then say that, okay, this particular optimizer is giving me the best result, and therefore I will use this particular optimizer going forward. That, and it is because of that reason that we need to be more familiar with how to use different optimizers, or for that matter the different hyperparameters that we have. How do we get the results using all of these different hyperparameters, and see that what works best for me. In that case, if you see from the practical perspective, what happens is that if a person who knows how to use different optimizers, or for that matter different other parameters, has no disadvantage compared to a person who knows the mathematics of it. So for example, there are two people. One knows the entire mathematics of how Adamax differs from Adam, and how Adam differs from RMS prop, and all of these are different types of optimizer. He has no advantage over a person who knows how to use all of these and get the results of
all of these and see that whether Adamax is working the best or Adam is working the best. And that's the point I have been emphasizing all the time, that as a data scientist or an data science engineer, you need to know how part very well. Why part? If you know, well and good, and you must try to know that, but it's not really that important. What is more important is that do you really know how to use it? And that is what we will try today. That if I have, say, 8 different types of optimizers, can I obtain the results using all the 8 and see that which one works best for us? So we will come to that in today's session. So let's run with a different optimizer. This part we have done earlier, and just as we had done earlier, we will train the model now. And during the training process, we are calling early stopping and we are calling the checkpointing.
Say here we are running 50 epochs, and the patience we had given was 50. Okay, so it will run for the entire 50 anyway. Okay, now all the 50 epochs has been run. We can see how it has performed. So the pattern is more or less the same. On the bottom, you see the losses, and then you see the accuracy on the top. Both of these are going on improving. Then again, the same process. Since I have, if you see here, the last one is not really the best one. The best one we have obtained in epoch number, yeah, the best result we had obtained in the epoch number 9 itself. After that, the performance did not improve. So what the checkpointing was doing is that the moment it improved, it has saved, and therefore we will now call the model which we had obtained, or we will call those weights which we had obtained in the ninth epoch, because that gave us the best result. After that, there is no improvement in the result. So that is what we are doing here. We are calling those weights which were the best weights. So now we will load the model with the weights that we had obtained in the ninth epoch. That is what model.load weights will do. And then we'll compile the model with those weights. That is what is being done here. And then we make the predictions and get the results. So as we make the prediction on the digit data set, it is giving me the accuracy of 98%. Okay. This is how we had defined the model earlier. Okay. Now, today we will see that if I want to use all the functions and features of the sklearn, then there are certain wrappers available in Keras, which allows you to utilize different functionalities which is available in the sklearn library. So if you go back to our very initial discussion, the entire platform of Python and different machine learning algorithms, different data science algorithms which have been developed over Python platform, they have evolved in different stages from different groups of people, but all of them are actually interoperable. And that is what the beauty of the entire Python platform is. So we used certain libraries from sklearn when we were doing the regression and classification and clustering. Now we have now we are using the TensorFlow as a library for deep learning and Keras as the wrapper over TensorFlow. But Keras and sklearn, they can also work together, and we'll see that here. For
making them work together. A few imports that we had done earlier that we should revisit here. So if you see here, this line, we are calling a wrapper over sklearn, and sklearn, the full name is scikit-learn. So in Keras, we have a wrapper which will allow us to work with the functions which are there in the scikit-learn. Okay. So if you want to run a regression or a classifier or different operations on that one, we can we can call the wrappers, and this one allows us to use the scikit-learn functions in Keras itself. Okay. So all these are interoperable. We'll see that it's not very difficult to use it either.
Okay. So what we do, we'll do, we'll call this wrapper for the classifier function, and the same way it can be called for regression. So we call Keras classifier, and then within that, we provide the name of our neural network model. So if you see, classification model is the name of my function. So the name of my function where we are defining the parameters of the classification model is, name of my function is classification model. So I provide the name of this function when we are defining the classifier here. So here build function is where we give the name of the function, and after that we can define how many epochs, what is the batch size, verbose, and all those things. But the key here is that we are calling now Keras classifier, and we give the name of the function, and we create an instance of that. Now this instance we can directly use in different types of libraries that we are using. So we have earlier experimented with the cross validation score, where we have seen that we can give the commands as to the creation of the k folds, and the concept of the k fold was that given a data set, if we are saying that number of splits is equal to 3 here, in that case it will divide the data set into 3 different buckets. In the first iteration, the system will keep aside one of these buckets, and that would be used for validation. So the training data set will be the first of the 2 buckets, and the third bucket becomes the data set for validation. Then in the second iteration, it will take first and third as a training set, and the second bucket will be used for validation. In the third iteration, it will take the second and third as a training, the second and third as the training data set, and the third one will become the data set for validation. So that way, we can test the stability of the model in the training process, that it may give a very good result in one iteration, but it should consistently give results over the several iteration. And this part we had done earlier, which is called the k-fold process, or the k-fold optimization. And here, since it is we are using the data for classification, we are using the stratified k-fold. And what does that mean is that when we are creating these different buckets, one way is to select the data randomly and say that these are the 3 different buckets. So randomly chosen, randomly divided into 3 different buckets or 5 different buckets, depending upon how much is how many iterations we want to do. In the stratified k-fold, it ensures that while doing the random selection, it will also ensure that I have the representation from each output group. So if you see, when we are having the data set of the digits, then it contains data set having all of these digits. For example, it will have some records are for 0, some records are for digit 1, some records represent digit 3 and 4 and 5 and so on. So when we are doing the k-fold selection, it needs to ensure that every fold or every bucket has an proportionate representation of all the digits. It should not happen that majority of them are either 0 or 1 and very few representation from the other digits. So the stratified k-fold, what it does is that it ensures that in the buckets that we create from our data set, it has a proportionate or an appropriate representation for each of these outputs that we have, or for each of the categories that we have in our data set. So if you're not concerned with that, if you're not doing the classification, if you're doing it for regression, then we can just use k-fold. But if we are dealing with classification, then we should use stratified k-fold, because it ensures that when we are dividing our data into different buckets, each bucket has a good representation of all the categories that we want to have. And then we can use the cross val score. What does it do? That now it will, so first we define the classifier, then X train, Y train, and what is important here is cross validation is equal to folds. It means that cross validation will now run 3 times here. Since I have given n split is equal to 3, the cross validation will now run 3 times. And in each iteration, one part of the data set will be set aside for classification. So let's try to run this. So if you see that cross val score was a feature that we had, so cross validation was a feature which is available in the sklearn library. The neural network model we have defined in Keras, because Keras is the one where, Keras and the TensorFlow combination is actually a good model for defining the neural network. But having defined my neural network in Keras, can we use the cross val score functionality of sklearn? For doing that, we'll create a wrapper from the Keras library, and it's not very difficult. We call the classifier, Keras classifier, from the wrapper library. Then we provide the function name and the other parameters with which we want to run the classifier model. And now the classifier, this variable, which is now containing a Keras classifier, now that can be used in the sklearn libraries or sklearn function like cross val score. So if you see here, we have run this model. What it is doing is that since we have given CV is equal to folds, and folds has say 3 splits, it means that it will run the same process 3 times on different data set. So if you see, it runs from here 1 to 10 and it ends here 10 of 10. Then it runs again 1 to 10. So that is now on the second fold. So the first 10 runs, it will use, so X train data. Now the system is divided into 3 different buckets. In the first run, we will use the first bucket as the testing or the validation data set, and the second and third as the training. Now it runs again the same thing 10 times, because we have given the number of epochs is equal to 10. And this will be run where the second bucket will be used for validation and first and third will be combined for training. And then it runs again the third time. This is what we have seen even earlier, that how the cross validation works, where we can run the training process on the data set that we have, but during each training iteration, one part of the data set will be kept aside for validation. And depending upon the number of folds we create or number of buckets we create, it will run that many times. The benefit of that is that now we can see what is the average result over different runs, and that we can obtain here. So if you say print average, it is giving me 89% accuracy. We can also uh, look at the values in different runs. So you see that we had given the threefold, and the individual accuracy that we obtained in the first and the second and the third one is more or less the same. So we know that the system is running in a stable manner. It means that the variation in result from one run to the other, from one part of the data set to the other is not very much. It means that it is a stable function. But the main purpose of demonstration here, and this part we had done earlier, the main purpose of demonstration was that how we can use the cross-val functionality, which we had in sklearn, for my neural network. Earlier, we had used the cross-val score for the libraries that we imported from sklearn itself. For example, on linear classifier or the SUD classifier. So we had run these cross-validation over the scikit-learn libraries. Now we are running the same function on the neural network. And to be able to do that, we just need to create a wrapper so that the neural network models are wrapped as the scikit-learn function. Okay, and then we have the flexibility to use the scikit-learn libraries as well. So this part was to demonstrate that one. Similarly, we can use the grid search functionality, which is a very powerful function, and then we will see that how it and why is it so powerful. Earlier, I was talking about that you have different types of optimizers. So if you see, these are the different types of optimizers that are normally used on regression uh, algorithms. So you have RMSProp and ADAM and SUD and several others. As I was mentioning that as a data scientist or as a data engineer, what is the most important thing for you to know is that these are the maybe 8 or 10 different optimizers which I have available. And therefore, you should be running your experimentation with all of these and say that the best result is coming from the optimizer A or B or C, and then we should say that because I am receiving the best result from RMSProp or SUD on this given data set, I should be using that particular optimizer. But how do we do that? One way is that we can go to the model and change the optimizer, or that we had parameterized here. So if you see, while calling that function, we can call the function one by one. We can give a for loop. So if you see here, while we are calling the classification model, we have given a provision to define the optimizer. So either we can first we give the RMSProp and then we see the result. Then second time, suppose here we change this to Adam, and then we obtain the result with Adam. Compare that with the previous one, which was Adamax. So either we can go on doing it, or we can write a for loop where we can define all the different types of optimizers as a list, and then we say that in each loop we will use a different optimizer. But then the combinations actually become large because we are not talking about experimenting with just the optimizers, but there would be several other parameters that we want to experiment with. That how does this combination work? How does that combination work? And that part is handled in a grid CV very easily. So right now, what we are doing, what we can do is in a crude fashion. That is, I can go on changing this optimizer and then see the result, store that result and compare that. Either we can do it manually, But the easier thing is to just call the grid CV function, which once we define, so now earlier we had got the results with the ADAMAX optimizer. Now we have obtained the result with the ADAM optimizer, and we see that the results are somewhat different. So either we can repeat this process again and again, and here we see that it is not really giving us very good result because it is only 0.09, and whereas the earlier one, there must be something wrong somewhere because it should not give this bad result. Okay, so with this optimizer it didn't really work well. This time we had worked with Adam, and the results are not that good. So what we can do now is that rather than doing the crude way, we have a function called grid search CV. So in this case, we can define the different parameters as a list. So for example, what are the different optimizers you want to use? We can just give them as a list. Then we can say that we want to experiment with different batch sizes. We can give that as a list. So I want to experiment with say 128 and 256 batch sizes and see that whether there is an improvement in the results. So if you see here, we are using 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 different optimizers. And suppose if you want to experiment with different number of epochs and different number of batches, how many combinations now we will have? So we'll have here 8, and each of these 8 will be run with 10 epochs and then with 20 epochs, and then each of these will be run with the 128 batch and 256 batch. So if you see, the number of combination here becomes 8 into 2 into 2. So 8 into 2 is 16, 16 into 2, 32. And then the cross validation. Earlier we saw that the cross validation, the data would be split into different buckets. So even if we use say cross validation as only 3, then the number of iterations that it will run and obtain the results will be 8 into 2 into 2 into 3, because the cross validation is 3. So that becomes 96 different times that it will run, and it will obtain the accuracy parameters over these 96 runs, and then it will tell you that this is the performance that you have got in each combination, and this is the best combination. So that actually saves a lot of time for us. And because it is going to be too many combinations, I will drop the epoch here so that we are running with lesser number of parameters, and I'll keep the cross validation as only, let's keep it 3 here. Cross validation is equal to 3. So as you can see that I am going to now get the results for each combination of these optimizers. So I have 8 different optimizers. Each of these optimizer will be run first with a batch size of 128 and second time with the batch size of 256. It means that it will run 8 into 2, 16 times, and each of these combination will be run over 3 folds. It means that this combination of the RMS prop and batch size of 128, while doing the optimization, it will segregate the data into 3 folds, and therefore it will run 3 times. So each combination will run 3 times. It means that 8 into 2, 16. 16 combination will run 3 times. It means that 48 times the model is going to run. And since it is going to run 48 times, let me keep the number of epochs as a smaller number. So let me keep as say here 5 and 10 so that we run faster. Batches are fine. Maybe since we have 60,000 records there, let me keep the batch sizes slightly larger so that it runs faster. So batch sizes I'm defining as 1000 and 2000. Okay, number of epochs we will define as a lower number. Anyway, number of epochs I have commented out. So when we run that, we'll keep a lower number of epochs. Okay. So now we are ready to run this. Just let me see whether it will run only one epoch. Okay. Classifier. So epochs, let me define only 5 epochs here. Okay. So now, if you see here on the top, it is saying that fitting 3 folds, because the value of the CV or the cross validation we have given as 3. It will run each of these iterations 3 folds. So it will be fitting 3 folds for each of these 16 candidates. When we say 16 candidates, what are these 16? 8 of these optimizers, and each optimizer it will run with a batch size of 1000 and then with the batch size of 2000. So that becomes, it will run 3 folds on each of these 16. So that becomes 48,000, 48 times it will run. As you can see that the batch size is first 40, then 20. And why is that? Because the number of batches is 40 when our batch size is 1000, and our number of batches is 20 when our batch size is 2000. So it has run with all of these optimizers and all this combination of different batch sizes, and it gives me the result for each of these. Okay, having obtained the result, now I can print the best result and the result for each of these. So as you can see that it is giving me the best result as 0.81, and this best result was obtained when my batch size was 1000 and the optimizer was Adam. Okay. Now it also gives, I can also obtain the result for each of these 16 combinations that we had. So it ran for 3 folds and it is taking the average of those 3 folds for each of these combination. It is saying me that when we ran with the optimizer as RMS prop and the batch size is 1000, then my average accuracy was 0.7461. That is what the mean test score we are getting here. And the standard deviation was 0.02. Similarly, we obtained 8171 when my model was Adam, and all these other numbers. So if you see that some of these are giving a very bad result, for example, delta is not working here because the accuracy is only 0.9. Similarly, FTRL is not really working well. It's giving a very low accuracy. So if you see here, now we see that if we are running it in small batches, large batches, and with different optimizers, the result is Adam. Now, since we have some more time, we can experiment with maybe a larger number of iteration, and then you will see that how we can improve the performance. Let me run this for 50 epochs each. And cross validation also, let's include here 5. And batch sizes will retain as smaller batch sizes. So here, just to note, the best result that we had obtained on the digit data set was 0.81, and we are using the digit data set itself here. Now if we run the grid search, now we will know that across all different parameters, which one gives me the best result with different batch sizes. So here the problem in the grid search is that the moment you expand one of these, so for example, the batch size, if I want to experiment with 3 different batch sizes, the number of computation actually goes on increasing exponentially. Other variables also we can bring in. And how do we do that? Now we say that my list of the optimizers that I want to experiment with is this. List of the optimizers, or the list of the batch sizes we define here. Then we put that into another variable called params, and we define these things as a dictionary. So we say that batch size is equal to batch and optimizer is equal to optimizers. It means that uh, each of these are having a name and the pair. And then we put that dictionary inside the grid search CV. So we call the grid search CV function, and the parameters which we required is the estimator. So my estimator is the classifier which we have defined here. Parameter grid is equal to this dictionary that we are providing here, and in this one we are changing two things. We are changing the optimizer and we are changing the batch size. We can also bring in other parameters like epoch numbers that we want to change and so on. And the cross validation is equal to 5. So once we call the grid search CV with these parameters, what it will do is that it will run this estimator with each of the combination that we have defined here in the parameter grid and so many folds. And then it will obtain the results for each of these combination. So now if we run for a slightly larger set, so here now it is going to do 80 fits. Last time it was 48 fits because the number of folds was only 3, and we have not changed the number of 16, but we have increased the number of epochs for each run. Earlier we ran with 5 epochs, now we are running with 50 epochs, so it will run a bit slowly. And that's why you can actually achieve the most optimal result, because with the grid search CV, it will take care of creating all these different combinations. You don't really have to do it to the hard part manually. And then in the end, we can programmatically achieve that which combination of the different parameters is giving me the best result. And this grid search CV is not only for the neural network. This grid search CV is a function that we are importing from scikit-learn or the sklearn libraries. So all the earlier models that we have learned, you can also apply grid search CV there. And as we are experimenting with different combination, and we have given a higher number of epochs there, it will take some time. But I suppose that the result should be coming a bit better. So it is done. Let's see here. So best result has improved from 0.81 to 0.85, which is slight improvement. And this time also my best optimizer is Adam. So now it gives me an idea that maybe Adam is working the best. And now, since we have seen that over different tests that we have done, the Adam itself is giving me the best parameter. Now what we can do is that, having known that Adam is the best optimizer to use, now we can go back to our original model and we can run a much larger number of epochs using Adam. So we are doing the classification. We come here, then we define the model with Adam, okay? Because Adam was giving me the best performance, isn't it? It was the, yeah, it is the Adam which is giving me the best performance. So now what we can do is that we can come to the classification model, and since it is not possible to use the early stopping or the early stopping and checkpointing, you cannot use directly in the grid search CV. And therefore, having identified with a few iterations that Adam is giving me the best result, now we can come to our classification model. We can run with this Adam, and then we can fit this with maybe a much larger number of epochs. And since we have the early stopping here, we don't really need to be worried about running a very large number of epochs, because if the performance is not improving, it will stop anyway. So now we'll run this with 500 epochs and Adam as the classifier, as the optimizer. The batch size also, we saw that 128 was giving a better result. So now we run this, and then whatever we obtain, maybe that's the model I'll put into production. Okay, so it is, I think, taking from the previous runs. It's not improving that performance anyway. It will stop after 50. So one thing, as you are seeing here, that the performance on the test data set is actually not improving. Although on the training data set, it's coming down. On the test data set, it's not really improving. And that's the real test. So we get the results here. There is something wrong here. Accuracy is coming as 0.09, which actually should not. Okay, let me run this once again with the same number of things. So we define the early stopping, we get the visit data set from the input, model we call as optimizer is Adam, activation is softmax. This is the regression model. Get this input shape, initialize the model. 96. Okay, we'll just reduce the, now we are running out of time, so we'll not run that many. We'll just reduce the number of iterations to here 50, and then So in today's session, we saw mainly three things. One was that we spent some more time on different types of activation function. The four main types of activation functions we saw: softmax, then sigmoid, tanh, and relu. These are the four main activation function. Then next important thing that we saw is that when we had gone step by step creation of the neural network, how do we put that into a function so that we can call that again and again. The third thing that we saw today, that having created a function for the neural network, we can work with different features of scikit-learn itself, like cross-val score and grid CV. And the last one that we saw today, or the new thing that we learned today, was how to use grid CV, grid search CV, when we can optimize the models across different parameters, like different types of optimizers, different number of batches, different number of epochs. Okay, so here I think the mistake I was making here. So this one also has to be added. Yeah. So now if you see, our result has improved from 0.81 to 0.98. So that's the life cycle that we should go with the neural network. So first we define the network, how many layers, how many nodes, what will be the activation function in each layer. Having done that, then we should use the grid search CV to get a feel of which of these optimizers or which are the other different parameters. And when I see these other different parameters, I'll go into that later on. Today, we have seen that optimizer is one of the hyperparameters. Optimizer is the one that we can choose that which optimizer to have. And then having seen that which optimizer and which batch size is actually gives me a better result, now we can come back and run a very large number of epochs, of course by giving the early stopping parameter, so that I can get the best result. And as we can see that we achieve as high as 98% accuracy. Now, if you work with the function, the other good part is that without making much of a change, now I can run the same model on my fashion data set. What do I need to do? I just come and change my, so here, rather than saying digit data, I will here use fashion data. And now the same algorithm I can run on fashion data set and see that what is the performance of the model. Rest everything remains the same, but now I will get the result of this neural network or the performance of classification, not on the digit data set, but on the fashion data set. And that that is why, you should make the reusable functions every time after you have done the first set of iterations, so that it becomes much easier to work with different data models and different types of optimizers and so on. So only one change I did, that I changed the data set, and now I am able to run the same neural network on the fashion data set as well. And of course, we need to see what is the performance, and this performance is likely to be slightly worse than the digit data set because we are dealing with more complex images now. It's not just simply handwritten digits. So we again load the best weights and we get the classification result now on the fashion data set. What happened here? Accuracy is now showing only 0.04, which actually is very bad. But anyway, the process remains the same. We may have done some mistake. Or maybe the Adam is not the one which is working so well here.
We will experiment with that. Okay. So with that, I will end the session here. And tomorrow, now we will see that now we have understood how to create the neural network architecture, how to define that, how to call that, how to train that. So starting tomorrow, we'll go into the computer vision, and which will be very exciting because now we can start processing different images. We can train our models to identify different types of objects, and we'll also see that how we can use the model not just to identify the human faces, but also the expression on the human faces, whether a person is smiling or he is sad or he is angry. Some of these things we'll start seeing tomorrow. So if there are no questions, then we can end the session now, and we'll again assemble tomorrow morning at 7. Is that fine, Rishabh?